LSU, though, because this is actually a fascinating game.
It was.
And there's a ton to talk about. Again, bird's eye view, big picture, Jake, the fact that this game ended how it did, given the context of how it actually played out, is a huge credit to LSU with the turnovers and everything else that we talked about. Like, to right before the half have Bama go touchdown, pick, touchdown. Then you open the second half, you're driving the ball, you fumbled, they go touchdown. At that point, it's 20-7. You're already 28-point dogs coming in the game. You should have gotten your ass kicked. You did not. There's a ton to celebrate therein. Defensively, you held the line from that moment on. Offensively, you could not get it done. And I think that's where this conversation has to start, is with the offense. And then what do you do when you talk about offense? You talk about the quarterback. And although with the Saints, I said that it doesn't really start with Trevor Siemian, with LSU, it does start with Max Johnson. The bottom line is he's just not playing well right now. And I'll just read exactly what I wrote here, Jake, and see if you agree with it. Ultimately, I think he's trying to be too perfect, and his decision-making remains too slow. It's leading to inaccuracy. It's leading to getting hit, missing the timing on open guys, struggles to throw the anticipation throws, tries to wait till they are actually open. And right now, it just feels like you have a Max Johnson that is just thinking too much, trying to be too mistake-free, too perfect, and gone are some of the instinctual genius brushstrokes that he displayed last year, right? I also think about this because, look, granted, I still don't think that the offensive system is always putting him in the best position to succeed, and I think it's crazy it's taken me this long to realize that. Look, I think that he's really missing Steve Ensminger, just from a, maybe not even just like a pure play call, but just like approach to the game, how he's processing. For whatever reason, again, gone is the instinctual play of Johnson that he had as a freshman under Ensminger versus now as a sophomore under Peets. So whatever, but the heavy lifting I don't think was scheme in this game. The heavy lifting is he's just too slow right now.
So every play in football has a clock, and I said it on the Hurry Up with Cody after. Every play in football has a clock. Is it a pass play? If it's a run play, if you're run blocking, if you're trying to stop the run on defense, if you're trying to cover somebody, there's always a clock, right? And if you get behind that clock, you're not going to be successful. Same thing with quarterback. It's probably the most important position, right? And you've got to be ahead of that clock. You have to anticipate. You have to be ready in any situation. If they fool you on the coverage, the clock isn't to throw the ball into the coverage you didn't think. The clock is to throw it 17 rows up into the stands. That's part of the clock, right?
Yeah.
Live to play, right? Live to play the next down. And the play that I'm going to keep coming back to this week is the 3rd and 4 where you throw the interception. Because a lot of people on the sideline and in the stadium and just chatter I've kind of heard is like, okay, yeah, that one's tough. It bounces off somebody, ends up in the arms. Well, it's like, no, if you go back and you watch it,
should have been thrown way earlier.
It's like the old thing you hear in middle school football, high school football, any level. You can't throw late over the middle. Okay, well, you can't throw late anywhere on the field. Because if you throw late, then things like that are going to happen.
Well, I mean, and look at how late he throws it. You literally have multiple routes bunching up on one another because
those are stick routes. Those are stick routes. If they're open, you hit it. If they're not, in the stands. Because then you punt, and your defense is dominating.
Yeah.
Not playing well, not, holding their own. No, they're dominating the line of scrimmage. I encourage everybody to go back and watch that game on the defensive front. Neil Farrell, Jaquelin Roy couldn't be blocked. Couldn't be blocked. Like, not slow down, like they couldn't be blocked. They were dominating. The linebackers played their best game I've ever seen them play. Like, they continue to grow, right? So in that situation, try to hit the band with the football in the stands. Because then you're going to punt it. And you're probably going to go into halftime. At worst, I think you're going to halftime 10-7. Probably 7-7. It's just everything has a clock. And if you're behind that clock at any position, certainly quarterback, you're not going to be successful.
Yeah, and unfortunately, he remains behind that clock. So at this point, yeah, you just have to, I think you have to try something new. So I think it probably is time to give Nussmeier a start and a real look. And yes, will you open yourself up to mistakes? Sure. But right now, you're costing yourself by the lengths that you are going to avoid those mistakes, right? And if nothing else, I mean, maybe it's the best thing for Max as well to kind of take a step back and kind of refine himself a little bit, because you do need – I feel like the more instinctual play of Nuss will pay dividends for LSU right now, even with whatever mistakes it brings. And then, look, and then it goes even just to, like, drill back down to the football, like, pure football scheme side of it a little bit. Like, not pulling the ball on any of these runs, the read guy has nothing to actually read, right? If I'm a backside defensive end and I see counter, I'm not going to respect the quarterback pulling it, because why would I? I'm just going to crash down as hard as I can and try to make that tackle from behind, which you saw a couple of times. So it's again, and this is where I think you get into some of the philosophy being kind of broken at its core. Again, you have an RPO, and we talk about it every week, but you have an RPO-based offense where the quarterback doesn't run. Mm-hmm. No, he never pulls the ball. It seems so inherently flawed to me. And so, yeah, unfortunately, I think that's where this game starts, because, look, the O-line actually played great. It sounds insane. Like, I really can't wrap my head around the fact that this is the same O-line that I broke down the first 5 weeks that looked like one of the most hapless, confused, bad groups in the entire country, and now I just saw them handle Alabama for a 4-quarter game. I mean, run blocked well, pass pro great. I mean, a lot of times where it looked like the O-line was giving up pressure, they really weren't. They had it picked up. It just Max has a little bit of happy feet. He's kind of fading in the pocket a bit instead of stepping up at times. And so, I mean, you want to talk about a good coaching job, huge credit, and the players, but huge credit to Brad Davis and this O-line group for staying on task, continuing to fight, because the improvement that they showed has just been kind of, I mean, real. I probably overuse this phrase, but kind of mind-blowing, because I don't really understand how the same group that I watched against Central Michigan failed to block a soul just took Alabama toe-to-toe for 4 quarters, and it's a huge credit to those guys. I mean, Jake, I would say the same thing applies to, like, literally the same thing applies to linebackers. They were unreal. They were fantastic on Saturday.
Yeah, real quick, I do want to make a note about the offensive line. Only the third LSU Tiger to rush for over 100 yards in Tiger Stadium. Ty Davis-Price joins Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Kevin Falk. So pretty rare company.
In Bryant-Denny or in Tuscaloosa?
Yeah, in Tuscaloosa.
Okay.
Yeah, against Alabama. So it kind of tells you what company they were in and how the offensive line did. I mean, like you said, go back, watch it. Pockets were there. The pressure they gave up, Will Anderson on the sack he got, it was a stunt, and they didn't pick up the stunt. But as far as, like, one-on-one pressure.
Will Anderson's going to get his. Yeah. He gets a sack every game. So, like, it is, I mean, I'll take that. This was.
Right. No, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like, that's going to happen. But moving on to the linebackers, filling their gaps, being aggressive, using their hands, getting off blocks, being the person that brings the punch and not trying to react off something when you're kind of engaged with an offensive guard at the second level. It was really impressive. They came out and they were so multiple. It was a 4-2-5 cover one for a majority of the season. You self-scout, you say, we can't be this team. We've got to be more creative. Okay, you saw like a true 4-3 with Mike Jones, right?
Yep.
That was something we have not really seen.
Yeah, it's true.
We saw some odd fronts. We saw linebackers, Damone Clark, your Mike linebacker, on the line of scrimmage, rushing from the edge. And we saw so many different things.
I'm sorry, Jake. Why have you not been rushing Mike Jones all year? He had some pass rushes where I'm like, dude, this guy can get after it.
The one where he dipped his shoulder, avoided the rush.
Hiding behind, he kind of hid behind Neil Farrell, who had a great across-the-face move to drag everybody in. And, like, look, the self-scout period paid dividends. I wish that they could somehow self-scout it a bit earlier, because a more aggressive approach would have
first-year
paid dividends.
coordinators. So. Really, when I was doing my notes, like, okay, man, this is, these are things that you learn, and unfortunately, it's tough to learn those type of lessons at LSU when you're in the midst of a season. We all know that. But the game plan for defense was very unpredictable, right? You were so predictable, and Coach O called you out a little bit, which we said, look, when you self-scout, that's what you have to do. It was not that this weekend. They were lining up everywhere. They were doing what they were supposed to do.
Yeah.
Give the defensive backs credit. They held up. I know that Cam got beat on the 58-yard touchdown, but even Cam Lewis, I thought, had moments. I mean, he had the sack strip. And what did we talk about, right? We talked about coming into the game, you blitzed lower than any Power 5 team in the country. You only brought someone outside the front seven 2.5% of the time, I think the number was. You had 0 simulated blitzes. You did all of those things and did them extremely well. in this game, man. I do hate for the defense that this performance isn't one that we can sit there and champion as a win and going into Tuscaloosa and shutting down a very high-powered offense. Durante Jones got the best of Bill O'Brien in this one.
I mean, this was the highest-scoring offense in the SEC, 46 points a game. They average over 100 yards rushing, or their running back alone averaged over 100 yards rushing every game. They had over a 30-plus game streak of scoring 30 points or more. I mean, an offense that nobody's been able to stop for 2 years. And they made it 20-7 with 12 minutes left in the third. For the final 27 minutes of the game, they did not score a point. And, yeah, Jake, it's kind of like a microcosm of Damone Clark's season, right? I hope it's not lost in the mediocrity of what this season has been as a whole, because it was a stellar
I really don't think it will be. And I kind of put it out there on Twitter last night that after rewatching the game, just the improvement of the linebacker position just jumps off the page to you. And of course, there were some people who were like, "Oh, there's another position that jumps off." I get all that, but I'm just telling you from improvement wise.
Yeah.
Now the offensive line's gotten better throughout the year. There's no question about that. Central Michigan to now, come on. But the linebacker position was so bad last year.
Horrible.
It was one of the worst things that you could turn on tape and watch.
Yeah.
And they have continued. No, you're exactly
It was like
right.
offensive to my football mind what that Pelini did with that linebacker crew last year.
It's continued to grow, and they've continued to change the narrative of what that position is. They're playing aggressive. In this moment, you start to think, okay, which coaches potentially, regardless of who the head coach is next year, who could be, still on this staff? And nobody's ever going to come in and just completely clean house. Like that doesn't happen in college football very often, because you want to have ties to your current players.
Yeah.
You want to have ties to, the recruits that you're trying to keep, and you want to have ties around the building, all those type of things. I think Brad Davis and Blake Baker probably will get that opportunity.
And they're both super tied into the local scene. I mean, Brad Davis literally from Baton Rouge, Blake Baker from the North Shore, right?
Yeah. Played Tulane, yeah.
Yeah, and then obviously Blake's resume being the DC at Miami speaks for itself. So, yeah, they would look like two guys that have really put their, they are doing their best to make a case for themselves, say, look, I don't want to move again. And I hope that works out. It's funny, man. Two good hires there, but unfortunately, some of the others just did not play out. All right, when we get back, we continue to break down this LSU-Alabama game. Keep it locked here on Off the Bench.
Points out Max is a sophomore with a bad OC, still has 61% completion percentage, 2,000 yards, 20 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. That's I'm not sitting here saying, we've seen actually Max play better in a Tiger uniform. That's not it. But within this offense, with what he's being asked to do, that's not gelling. So it's not like you can't come back next year and open a competition and Max thrive. Max has a skill set. We have seen him thrive in an LSU uniform a couple of games here and there. It's not that. It's with what you're doing right now and who you currently have, it's not gelling together.
That's the thing. I'm not out on Max forever, but it's just clear that it's just not good enough to continue right now. Like you have nothing to lose by giving Garrett Nussmeier a real extended look and a shot at this point. And y'all know me. I have been the most hesitant to cross this line. So I do feel like if I'm now on this side of that conversation, then, I kind of had to be drug across here kicking and screaming a bit. But I did arrive here at my own. So it just, again, give an off season, whatever, maybe even later this season, just a day to step back, kind of reevaluate, because it's hard, Jake, the same way it's hard for this team to self-scout in the middle of the year. It's hard once the runaway train of momentum that is a college football season starts. It's hard to really sometimes always recognize why you're in the playing form that you are, right? And do something kind of really look inside yourself and be like, okay, how do I get back to what I was doing and to be more instinctual? Those are hard things. You can't just affect them overnight. And so, yeah, I again, not out on Max completely. He's done a good job. And look, and they lost Keyshawn Butte. I mean, the receivers were not super threatening. I mean, granted they were missed. They missed.
Yeah,
they were open.
I
watched the tape. There were missed passes for sure. But there was also a lot of good coverage as well. The absence of Keyshawn Butte is a bit of a black hole. You are feeling it in that.
Yes.
You don't have anyone else like him.
No, you don't. when they were in man coverage, I actually thought Besh was probably the guy that separated the most. I think that the Jack Besh at tight end and him and Mashburn aren't in the game a lot together has to go away.
Yeah.
Like Jack can still do some things at F and line up on the wing and bootleg underneath route, and we saw him open a couple of times. He caught a couple of them. All that's great. Him and Mashburn can be on the field in 11 personnel together. I think it's time for him to get some real receiver reps as well. Yeah. Not just some F reps where he's in there on third downs and certain personnels, and he's one of the guys right now that's getting open. And I understand you had a role for him, but Mashburn stepped up, and so now you can start to allow him to play in the field as well, and every personnel, not just these certain different packages on third downs or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I mean, why not, right? Just get your best weapons on the field. And without Keyshawn Boutte, that definitely probably feels like Jack Besh, Malik Neighbors probably in that number.
Brian Thomas had a couple of really nice routes going back and watching it as well.
Jure popped open deep that one time when Max missed him early on.
And there's times to spell guys. Trey Palmer, there's times to use him. Trey has elite speed. There was 3 times that Trey beat his corner deep, right? And Max was either pressured or he didn't see him or whatever. Because receiver's open in man coverage when he points to the DB and starts shaking his finger.
Yeah.
Like, hey, you're lucky he didn't see me. He did that at least 3 times. So I'm not saying there's not roles for all these receivers, but I'm saying start to utilize a guy like Jack Besh who, when you go back, and there was one time on man coverage on a third down that he picked up and he just left the nickel. Like the nickel was 3 yards behind him because he runs his routes full speed. I'm saying you can start to utilize him in different positions and pick your spots with some of these other guys. Like Trey Palmer right now is getting open deep, but you don't have the offense to be able to get him the ball deep.
Yeah, they got to you're right. Besh feels dynamic enough that it is kind of like why would you ever want him not to be in a route combination? I don't know if Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors have quite hit that level yet. They haven't had as much success this year. Though it was great seeing them find the end zone this game. When we get back, let's go ahead and adjudicate one of the big turning points of this game, which was to kick or not to kick. Keep it locked, OTB. At the end of the hour, let's go ahead and break down what I said. Should LSU have kicked it down 20-14 in the red zone?
So 6 minutes and some change left. I thought they would make the decision. They came back out with the offense. I was surprised. You kick it there. It's a 3-point game. They haven't done anything on you.
Yep.
Right? So they haven't really moved the football. They had a ton of 3-and-outs, and you've got the best kicker in the country. Now, I can understand the logic of, hey, are we going to be down here again? Our offense has sputtered at times. We got a chance to take the lead. We're right here. Let's go for it right now. Let's pull off the upset. I understand that logic, and you're not going for the tie because in the 20-17, if you make it that, you're going for the tie, trying to force overtime. But I just thought with the time left on the clock and with the way your defense was playing, that's what would have warranted a field goal there.
Yeah, so this to me is one of those true 50-50 decisions. And I have not always felt this way, right? Normally, I feel like there is a clear argument for why it was probably the right call at the time to do whatever you did, or the opposite, to do the opposite of what you did, right? This, though, again, to your point, Jake, your offense hadn't done anything, so you're like, we're here, right? And we haven't been here all night, so, like, we have to try to take advantage. We're going for the win. We have nothing to lose. Like, we're trying to win this game in T-Town. We need to get in the end zone. Yeah. Again, to your point, the flip side is their offense hadn't done anything, so should you have so like you trust the defense, right? But then it's
Danny, run that playback. Sorry to cut you off.
Can you trust a defense where you have that hasn't necessarily been so as consistent as you would want all year? In the end, though, Jake, because of how the game ended up playing out, LSU's defense did come through. You would have had those opportunities to kick a field goal and tie it, and or even take the lead and win the game late. Ultimately, I do think that pushes it into you should have kicked. Again, I feel it. It's a 50-50 decision, but I think the context of how it played out actually does make
coming into the game. It's like, oh, absolutely, go for it. But just the way the game was going, and they couldn't move the football. That's what would have warranted going for the field goal there. And last play, double coverage there.